What's up, guys? So I found a pretty cool audio clip here. I have a lot of people commenting on the channel, what is MGTOW? My videos appeal to a broader audience, and a lot of these people that watch my videos have never heard or don't understand what MGTOW stands for. They don't understand what it means. So I'm constantly replying to comments, trying to explain what MGTOW is all about. This video, or audio clip rather, is from an Ireland-based radio station where they interview a MGTOW spokesperson. This guy does an absolutely excellent job of explaining what MGTOW is all about. So if you guys agree with what he's saying, or you've got other ideas about what MGTOW is, let me know in the comments below, but hopefully this video can help a lot of people out there. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
An online group called Men Going Their Own Way, or MGTOW as they refer to themselves. Now, they claim to have 18,000 members. They oppose big government and feminism, and their ideal, one, it should be said, few of them have achieved, is a life free of any interaction with women at all. On the line is one of their spokesmen, though he has declined to give us his name. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you start by, I suppose, explaining why you, as a spokesperson for this organisation, have chosen to remain anonymous? What's the philosophy behind that?
Well, I'm not really remaining anonymous. I'm sort of representing the site. You're speaking to a website rather than, it's sort of a population of individuals, but it's important to make the distinction between being a spokesperson, like speaking to an individual, and speaking to a website.
Could you give us what is the basic philosophy behind Men Going Their Own Way?
Well, it's been around for a long time. It's you're kind of looking at version 2016. The basic philosophy has been around for a long time, and that is generally for a man to preserve and protect his own sovereignty above all other things. So, making his own choices rather than those that society would rather lay out for him. So, sort of rewind back maybe 100 years or so. There have been men that have been going their own way for a long time. As a matter of fact, we've found exact references to the phrase men going their own way in newspaper clippings dating back to 1853. So it's been a long time. You could probably take it back centuries, all the way back to Galileo and Schopenhauer. And there was a time when, when generally 90% of the planet thought that the Earth was the center of the universe, and Galileo came along and said that it wasn't. And the church was outraged by that, but there's been a bit of a battle between science and the church that's been raging on for centuries. So it's similar in that way, because, there are certain ways that you're programmed and told to live your life, the things that you're supposed to do, and there are bound to be a population of people that say, no, I don't care for that very much. Mm-hmm. So that's what you're getting here.
So who's science and who's the church here?
Well, that's interesting. Men Going Their Own Way is very, very grounded in reality. So we would be Galileo, and the church would be, say, the media and television and society at large. And as a matter of fact, the nickname that we have for that is the cathedral. So the cathedral is basically, I don't have it in front of me, but the cathedral is basically the media and society at large, and the general hive of the population. So what most people subscribe to as a whole. Men Going Their Own Way is very logic-based and very sort of common sense for men. That's the tagline, I guess you could call it.
Right. So what is the cathedral saying that Men Going Their Own Way would disagree with?
Oh, gosh, do you have an hour? You're in Dublin, so you're not actually part of you're part of the UK, but...
well, actually, we're not part of the UK. That all ended about 100 years ago.
I know you're not, but you could sort of be encapsulated into the Western English-speaking world, you know?
Yeah.
For the most part, the UK, Canada, and the US and Australia are really where it's pretty obvious the way that men are portrayed on television as, bumbling morons, especially in America. You've got the King of Queens, Everybody Loves Raymond, and Married with Children, and American Dad, and all of those. And there's a very stereotypical caricature of the Western American male as a bumbling moron, but isn't it interesting that they're all married and they have kids? And so there's a preconceived idea of what a man is supposed to be in society and culture at large, and what he's supposed to do. And men going their own way flip that the bird for the most part, and don't really endorse how men are portrayed in the media and in television and at large. I mean, for example, you're going to see a news headline that might say, women and children were forced to flee, but they don't talk about how men were forced to die. You hear read a headline that says 19 people died, some of them women and children. So it's like men don't even exist. Now, if a man were to go and rob a store or open fire in a movie theater or commit some heinous crime, then you will hear headlines that say 2 men robbed a jewelry store, or 1 man opened fire, or police searching for a gunman. But when men do something really great and amazing and exceptional, you never hear about them. Only when there's a catastrophe or a disaster. It's quite remarkable.
Why do you think that is going on?
I remember watching the Titanic when I was 10 years old with my family, and it was the old Titanic, pre-James Cameron, obviously. And I was watching that movie, and one of the male characters just sort of dressed himself up as a woman, and he put a scarf over his head, and he grabbed himself a seat on the lifeboat. And I said to my mom, "What's the big deal?" And she said, "Oh, a man just didn't do that. You just wouldn't do that. You wouldn't take a seat on a lifeboat if you were a man." And I thought that was complete garbage. And I turned to my father, who was not a very verbal man in the first place, and he didn't say anything. But I thought it was kind of ridiculous that right there at 10 years old, I was aware of the dynamic that was being force-fed. And actually, I was being taught that in my own family. "Oh, yeah, you don't do that. You go down with the ship, like the captain. And the women get the lifeboats and the kids get the lifeboats with it." So I was aware of that. How can I say this? Over a span of roughly 30 years of, growing up, it all sort of comes down to the fundamental premise. Eggs are expensive, sperm is cheap. So whenever I notice that lives are disposable, it's always male lives that are disposable. It's male lives that are shipped off to war. It's male lives that are, and then nobody talks about it. The number of soldiers that opt out, their lives are so bad that they choose suicide as an option. I mean, nobody ever talks about that. Ellen DeGeneres, of course, will talk about one gay teen who committed suicide and, because they were outed on Facebook, as if that was some big, huge problem in society, when in reality, tens of thousands of soldiers eat a bullet every year as well. Why is it that way? I couldn't pretend to answer that.
So in men going their own way, is the idea that the ultimate aim would be to live a life without women?
To live a life, just to live a life. I mean, just to live a life. And you could say without women, but that's not the primary consideration. I mean, I saw a sitcom on television. I don't remember what the show was. And he was a hotel magnate, and he was a sort of a high roller, and the woman said something about so you never married, and he said, "Why have a wife when I can have a life?" That was his response. I don't remember what show it was or where I heard it, but when I heard it, I thought, well, this is a very interesting answer. Why have a wife when you can have a life? And I think that we have seen lots of testimonials where a man in his 40s said, "I gave up everything in my early 20s, and I didn't even begin to realize my own potential." And it wasn't until he was in his 40s that he realized that he squandered his vitality and his dreams, to sort of make a woman happy and to make her dreams a reality, and realize that his were not. Rather than saying, "Oh, I'm going forward without women," it's rather, "I'm just going forward." And there are a lot of hazards when getting involved with women. You have to look at it like navigating the roads of life. It's not enough to just be a good driver. You also have to practice collision avoidance. So you actively have to be looking in your rearview mirror. You have to watch out for flying debris and all of that. You have to make sure that the person next to you is not going to cut you off. And women really do represent a sort of a hazard, especially with false accusations and paternity fraud, which is legal. How is that even possible that that is legal? That my wife can have an affair and then come home and toss me a baby and say, here, this is yours. That, women will go on television and say, oh, he's the father, and then find out that he's not the father, and she's not dragged away in handcuffs and fined for that. I mean, that's the single worst possible thing, nonviolent thing you can do to a man. Mm-hmm. Pin fatherhood on him. That's the worst thing that you can do. And that's legal. It's like perfectly legal.
Okay, can I just say can I just say one thing to you that some of the listeners might be thinking? They might think, well, Prime Minister of Canada, man. President of the United States, man. Most of the corporations of the world are run by men. Most of the countries of the world are run by men. Men have the vast majority of the power and the money. So it's difficult to argue that men are some sort of disenfranchised minority.
Well, it's actually not very difficult. I could sit here and do it for another hour. A woman collects a monthly check for being a bad wife and mother. I mean, women owe millions of them, even for kids that aren't even his. She collects a check, and that man, if he doesn't pay that, is going to prison. Like that's unconstitutional forced slavery. You can absolutely say, oh well, man makes most of the money and man runs the show and all of that, but man is also the most accountable in the eyes of the law as well.
How many people are in your movement in general?
Oh, well, it's a mistake to call it a movement, and I do have to correct that part because it isn't a movement. Feminism is a movement. Gay pride is a movement. They have parades and they have conferences and they have funding, and feminism is a big deal. They have government funding and massive amounts of money pouring into them, and they charge forward into battle literally like a movement. They have parades, they shut down traffic, conferences, speeches at the UN, spokespersons, all of that. That's a movement. But men going their own way is not a movement. Mm. It's similar to the London garbage strike of 1970, I think it was. I believe Thatcher was prime minister, and men decided they weren't going to take the garbage out anymore. And it piled up in the streets for weeks. It stank in the streets for weeks. And so was that a movement when those men said, I'm not doing this anymore? I don't see the point in doing this anymore. Mm. Or I don't believe that I'm rewarded for my efforts anymore. So what they didn't...
Well, it was a strike is what is known as.
I'm trying to distinguish the difference between actively doing something and not doing it. Okay. Where the inaction is the action.
Okay. How many people are engaged in the inaction, if you like?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I corrected the movement part. Sorry about that if I editorialized a little bit. We don't really know. I mean, there are a lot of YouTube producers that are men going their own way orientated. They produce some of the big producers on YouTube who create men going their own way interest videos. They are not members on our site, for example. So yes. We're a website, and when you join, you don't actually join the movement. You're just joining the website. So okay. We know that many of those producers are not signed up on our site. So out of the 15 that I can name off the top of my head, only 3 are subscribed. So if you take the number 17,600, which is currently the number on our site, you could easily multiply that by 5. But what's most remarkable about it is the number of men that actually sign up and leave an introduction and talk about it. They say, I didn't know this even had a name or this concept even existed. They actually believe that they've been roaming around on an island for the last 10 or 20 years of their lives. And then they stumble across us. And then they very frequently, every second or third introduction is like, wow, I thought I was alone. And that was my reaction as well when I originally stumbled across men going their own way materials. And I've been on my own since I was 17, roughly. So,
yeah. So the members of your website, what do they do for sex? If they're heterosexual.
You can still have sex. I mean,
with each other or is it with women?
Oh, God, no. No, I mean, men going their own way is not. No, no. I mean, come on. It's easier to have sex now than it ever has if you're a man.
Mm-hmm.
It's never been easier ever. Sex has been more attainable and more available to any man anywhere for far less trouble, effort, money, and time than anyone would have you believe. Having sex is absolutely no challenge whatsoever. I mean, think of my father, for example. Maybe he had 2 girlfriends and then he got married. But men today, I mean, if you have 2 or 3 lovers in your life, you're doing better than your grandfather ever did. So men today are Valentinos compared to men of 50, 60, 70 years ago. They still have, some of them have sex and some of them absolutely refuse to. I mean, but that's not exclusive to men going their own way. There are attractive women out there that aren't getting dates either. What do they do for sex? You can ask them the same question. I mean, I saw a music video called Single Girls, where this perfectly fine, attractive 21-year-old girl, thin and pretty and all of that, was singing about how she lays in bed at night with a mascara running down her face and how nobody texts her or calls her, asks her out on a date. And she's 21. She's not even a man going her own way. She's a woman actually interested in romance and dating, and she's not getting it. Who's not getting sex? It's boyfriends and husbands. Yeah. Comparatively.
Yeah, it's just the thing. It's just the thing. We do have to leave it there. The group is called, or the whatever you'd like to call it, Men Going Their Own Way. Their website is mgtow.com. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Oh, our pleasure. Did we answer all your questions?
Yes, you did.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you.